specializing. Let's say, got it. Um, Pam Bone is here to talk about myths and facts of landscape trees. And Pam's a longtime master gardener and horticulturist. I won't, I think she was the first county coordinator of a master gardener program in California, which was in Sacramento, and I don't even know how long ago, but quite a while ago. So Pam's got a wealth of information, and so welcome, Pam, and it's all yours.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, welcome everybody. We're going to learn all about landscape trees today. And yes, I've been around forever. I was actually hired in 1979 to start the program, Master Gardener program. And then I became a horticulture advisor with UC Cooperative Extension. And I have then obviously been practicing all of this stuff for 44 years. And we graduated our first class in 1980. And then it just went from there all over the place. And obviously, you know, you've got programs in Solano County and Yolo County, and Jennifer's had a program going for years and years and years, and I get the privilege of being able to teach landscape trees to a number of different counties, including Solano and Yolo County. What I'm doing today is taking what is often a 3.5 to 4 hour presentation for Master Gardener trainees and just condensing it down into a much smaller presentation. And it's going to highlight some things that I've seen in the landscape. A lot of it's based on research. A lot of it's based on just things I've seen out in the landscape and what I've been practicing for 44 years. And so we're going to discuss that today. I will take questions at the end. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly, just to make sure I get through everything. There's a lot to it. But if you want, you can put write yourself a note, or you can put it in the chat box and Jennifer will take a look at it. So we'll wait till the end and then we'll take time for questions. Okay. And I'm going to share my screen with you guys and show you the presentation here. And then we'll just talk from there. And I do have some, I guess samples, you could call them, some really bad looking trees. So you'll get to see those too. So I'm going to move you guys off to the side here so I can see anyhow. So yes, I am a master gardener, even though I was a horticulture advisor and the program coordinator for many, many years. When I left Cooperative Extension, I became a master gardener, and I have volunteered over 22,500 hours. And so what I'm doing today, for instance, is volunteering to help out, to pass on good information in that. And I have my bachelor's degree from UC Davis, and I also went to Washington State University majoring in pomology, which is fruit trees. So those are some of my credentials. Okay, we're going to learn a little bit about what research teaches us about the right and wrong ways to plant and care for trees. It's really important. This is a research-based organization. We're with the University of California. So we want to look at what's actually been proven out there. But then a lot of this is also based on just seeing things out in the landscape and learning from the research, then what's really going on out in the landscape. We're going to learn about planting, what kind of tree size, the planting hole size, use of amendments in the planting hole, should you use them or not? Grass around trees, is that good or bad? Staking, fertilizing and mulching, watering, and pruning. And there we're going to go from there. By the way, most of what I talk about today can pertain to shrubs, and it can also pertain to fruit trees. There are a few differences here and there, but think about woody plants in general, that a lot of this research is about woody plants. Okay, so we're going to look at myths and facts, what people think about trees and what's going on. A myth: you want to plant a big, large nursery tree because it's going to be bigger and grow faster than a small tree. And that is just not true. The fact is that small trees establish more quickly after planting. The reason is that this small tree has a root to shoot ratio that's more in line with one another. It's more proportional, so that you don't have this enormous tree right here with this little itty bitty root system trying to take up all that water in the heat of the summer. And in fact, as you will see, I put lots of things on the screen so you have a chance to read them, but every single one of these 24-inch box trees died, mostly because it looked like that they were stressed for water and that. But what happens is that the root systems of the smaller trees are replaced more quickly. They'll grow out into the landscape more quickly, and they're then going to be able to search for nutrients and water. large trees lose water faster than the roots can absorb, and they have to transport it to the leafy crown, and that treetop is way up there. But what happens then is water stress reduces the production of carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are trees' food. They make their own food through photosynthesis, and they have to make the food, they have to transport the food, and if they don't have adequate sources of water, if they don't have enough leaves to support the in relation to the roots, they're not going to do well. So the last thing, though, that's really critical, the larger the tree, the greater the chance you're going to have of having pot-bound, circling, girdling, kinked roots. I'm going to show you a few in just a minute. So here is the problem. This is a serious, serious landscape problem. It starts in the nursery right here. You see these kinked, they call them J roots sometimes. They circle, they kink, they knot, they go round and round. And you can see this even in your tomato plants or your petunias, but it's not as serious as an issue because they don't grow really large, and it's not going to affect the tree growth, the health, the stability. The roots are confined. They can't spread outward and hold the tree upright. So these trees are prone to leaning or to blowing over even years after planting. And I realized we had lots of atmospheric rivers and a lot of trees were going to go down just because the soil was liquefied. But I went out and looked at a lot of trees that failed this last winter, and many of them were because they had bad root systems. Trees will appear water stressed or that they need nutrients, even if the soil is moist and has been fertilized, like this tree right here. And you can see, you look at it and you think, excuse me, what's going on there? You look and you think, well, it doesn't have enough water. But if you actually dug down into it, you go, well, yeah, there's plenty of water down there. Looks a little dry on the surface, but it's dry down below. You look up close and you see that the roots look still like it's in a 5-gallon container, or a 15-gallon if it started off. And it's just not able to support itself. It's not able to put the roots out into the landscape. And here's one here, a big old root going round and round. That's just going to choke it off. That's like putting a tourniquet around your arm. It's going to cut off the lifeblood to the tree. Here's another one going round and round, and this little ginkgo is just literally falling over. Here's one that I've been following in a parking lot, and almost every tree looks like these two trees here. What it is that, first of all, it was in a nursery container, and it was a large tree, and these roots were all bound up in this nursery container. Because what happens, it often starts as a 1-gallon. I'm going to show you a tree right here that looks just like a 1-gallon. And there it is. It was a 15-gallon hackberry tree, and after 3 years, it started looking like it needed fertilizer and it needed water. And even though the guy was pouring on the water and fertilizing it, it wasn't surviving. So we dug up the tree, just like we dug up all of these trees. I have people bring me trees you can't even believe. I have a shed half full of bad trees and bad roots. And here's another one. Looks like it has a tumor. And they start really young. I have trees as little as tiny little 4-inch pots that go round and round like a little pigtail. And it just is on and on and on. It's one of the most serious issues we have, and that's why I'm stressing it today, because it's really, really bad. And I see it everywhere, and people don't notice it right away. This tree, look at it, it's pretty large right there, and then all of a sudden it failed. And then this purple leaf plum, that one also was the same thing. It was in a very restrictive planter, and the roots couldn't spread out, and the roots were already, when I looked at it up close, it was circling. So my tip to you is always check the roots and correct any problems before planting, if possible. Problem is you can't always correct it. Problem is that once planted, the root defects are very difficult to correct, and sometimes it's really hard to diagnose it. A lot of people, like I said, will call the office, talk to master gardeners, and say that there's something wrong with the tree, thinking that they need to water, they need to put on fertilizer, and it's not that at all. It's a bad root system. So I want you to loosen the roots from the potting mix before you plant the tree. This is a really good one right here, ideal. But even so, there's some matting down here. You look to see if anything's circling, and if you can, just tease those roots out. Clip any of the roots that are circling or damaged, non-woody roots. And this will stimulate new root growth. The problem is if you've got a lot of woody roots in there and they're all kinked, it's like a kinked garden hose. You're not going to ever get water through it. And it's really hard to straighten those out, to trim them or do whatever. And in fact, most of them can't be fixed when they're that bad. And you should just take the tree back to the nursery and don't even bother planting it. Okay, another myth. Tree roots grow really deep and they look just like the top of the tree. And that is completely wrong. We did not realize that that roots then, until they started doing research, is that tree roots actually go out very, very widely. They have to go out looking for water. They have to keep growing and growing. They're like your fingernails. Those little tiny little roots that absorb the water, they just are like there. They just keep growing and growing and going out looking for water. So tree roots do not grow deep. 90% of tree roots are in the top 18 inches of soil, and 99% of the roots are in the top 3 feet. And this isn't always just landscape trees too. This is fruit trees. Maybe on deep agricultural soils, they may go down further, but in most urban settings, suburban settings, this is true. The roots will extend anywhere from 2 to 4 times or more beyond the drip line, which is where the water drips off the edges of the branches or canopy of the crown up above. And the root diameter can be 1.5 to 2 times the tree height. So you think you've got a 20-foot tree out there. You think, where are those roots? Oh, most people water right next to the trunk and everything, and they don't realize, no, the roots are out 40 feet away sometimes. It means it's impacting what you do to the tree, how you water, everything. So anyhow, so then the root tap roots are very rare. You will see them when they first start, maybe in a nursery container, they die out. Oaks definitely have a taproot in nature, but they don't have it in a nursery container. And taproots are almost unheard of in landscape trees. So people will say, oh, but the taproot will go nice and deep into the soil. No, it won't. It breaks off and it branches out into lateral roots and grows out. And I like to think of the dinner plate analogy here. You take a big dinner plate and you put a little wine glass or a goblet on it. And basically this is the root system, this big dinner plate, going way out beyond the crown or the little goblet part of the glass. Another myth, trees need big, deep planting hole because they got to grow deep roots. Well, you just found out they don't grow deep roots. And Lee Fry, he was the farm advisor who was nice enough to retire so I could apply for his job. And he basically told me, you know what I'm digging here, Pam? I'm digging a tree grave. And that's what happens. It's just going to be a burial ground for a tree because it's going to sink into the ground, and that's really bad. Tree health and stability is affected by planting too deeply and or covering the root crown. That root crown area is very sensitive. And right here we have a valley oak that I went out on a field call to look at a park, and we had to dig it up because it was starting to do poorly, and they were going to put a playground under it for children. And they wanted to know if it was safe. And sure enough, it had root rot inside, infection and decay in there. So phytophthora water mold and other things. And sometimes it's just a matter of burying the trunk just a little bit. It just cuts off oxygen, which isn't good at all. And this is in my neighborhood. And actually, I need to go get another shot. This was taken about 3 years ago, and it looks even worse now. It's slowly dying. So my tip is, the best planting practice is to make tree holes nice and shallow and wide. Make a tree planting area if you can, minimally 2 times the diameter of the root ball as far as the width go. If you've got heavy clay soils or compacted soils, go out even further, as far as you can dig, 3 to 5 times the diameter. You want to make a planting area. You want it to be able to go out into the surrounding area. Then the depth, you want it at least at soil grade, and it's best if it's just slightly above. You want to be able to see those roots right here on the surface. Don't cover up the main little lateral roots coming off. In fact, if you look at this one, this happens to be a peach tree that I planted. And right here, you see this dark area. You know, the soil covered it completely up to here in the container. And this tree would have eventually died. We usually get people calling about a year, 2 to 3 years in, and they say, my tree, my fruit tree, especially a lot of fruit trees are very sensitive. is doing terrible, and I say, can you see the first few roots coming off? And then they start to dig and they realize, oh my gosh, it's buried 1 to 2 inches down. So you don't want that. To minimize settling, why not plant on a pedestal? In the old days, we told people for roses and fruit trees and stuff to make a mound and pat it and put the roots over it. Well, we could still do that. That would be just fine. You don't want to cover the root crown or that trunk flare. Leave it. It's fine. When we have telephone poles growing out of the ground, we've covered it. Whether it's an old tree or a new tree, look for that root flare. That shows you first you don't have girdling, circling roots because the roots are going out and they're holding nicely. So anyhow, and then planting too high may also cause problems. And so you do have to be careful about not having the little tree that looks like it's going to get up and just start walking away. You don't want that either. The roots then may not be stable enough to support a large tree. And when you first plant, those little tiny roots that we sometimes call feeder roots, they're the absorbing roots that absorb the water and the nutrients. Well, they can dry out and then they don't work. Out in nature, this happens to be on the upper Sacramento River. My husband goes fishing up by Dunsmuir. I go on hikes and I look at nature. And sure enough, there's a tree and the roots are all exposed, but it's not necessarily meaning it's going to be stable, and it could go over someday. Okay, another myth: soil amendments, compost, organic matter, you need to put it in the planting hole of trees and shrubs, especially in clay soils. No, it's completely wrong. I love compost. I have 7 compost piles. These are 3 of them right there. They're very active. We get lots of compost. I use compost all over the landscape, but not in the planting holes of trees and shrubs. That is our homemade compost there. And amendments for woody plants, again, lots and lots of research done all over the country and here in California. They often create problems and are not necessarily. So adding fertilizers, soil amendments, root stimulants is not recommended. That comes right out of a UC publication on planting landscape trees, which is a free publication that you can find online on the one of the Master Gardener websites or through UCIPM, or type in planting landscape trees, UC publication, and you'll get it. There has been shown that there's seldom any difference in the growth of trees or shrubs when you put amended versus unamended. The roots are slow to grow out into the surrounding soil. We call that the flower pot effect. We also get the bathtub effect, where you've got different layers. The soil in the container is usually not soil. It's a soilless mix that they make up of all kinds of different kinds of organic and inorganic materials. And that material is lighter. It has a different texture. So you go to water and then you'll have either the root ball doesn't get wet enough, or what'll happen is that the soil goes through and it sits in the bottom, and you get the flower pot and the bathtub effect. And then organic matter decomposes. If you've ever had compost, wood chips, or anything in your landscape, you know the plant can sink. And unfortunately, so what you do, you just take whatever came out of the hole and you just put it right back into the same old stuff. If those roots, which I already told you go out 20, 30, 40, 50 feet from a tree, can't grow in a little 3-foot area, they're not going to grow out. They have to be able to grow out into the surrounding soil. So use the original soil that came out of the hole. Now, I do have a tip though. Amendments are beneficial in entire planting areas. If you can go in and here we are, we're getting ready to plant a perennial garden here, and we're going to work it into the whole area. Or in this case, this was our backyard and we're getting ready to put in a lawn. And so we're going to mix in all kinds of compost or organic matter, raised beds, of course, and then you can doctor up the raised beds. For instance, growing blueberries. Some people can't even grow blueberries. The soil's not acidic. You put it in a horse trough like this, and you can put in as much of the acidifying type of organic matter that you need for blueberries to have the right pH. So, and then this is the lawn once it was established that we grew, and then raised beds and everything. They need to be thoroughly mixed with the native soil so you don't cause layering and then have problems with the water not flowing properly through them. Another myth: vitamin B1 root stimulant. It's the best thing ever. It makes new plants grow better. It overcomes transplant shock. No, it's a complete myth. It is ineffective. It does not work. It hasn't worked since well, since the day it was invented. And 1941, they did research back then. They've done it every year, seems like, since. And they've shown that thiamine hydrochloride, which is the active ingredient in vitamin B1, does absolutely nothing. All you're doing is putting on a product you don't need to put on and adding some water, which you do need to do, but you can just put the water on without it. So it doesn't make any difference whether or not you put on vitamin B1 or not. It's usually not harmful, but it is a complete waste of your money. Why not spend it on another plant or a better irrigation system or something like that? So don't use vitamin B1. If you feel like you need something, all the research, when they compared it, they compared the ones that actually showed that they worked with products that had fertilizer in it. It was the fertilizer that was doing all the work. There's a myth. When you fertilize, you feed the plant. You know what? You don't feed the plant ever. We say it all the time. You can look at any of these things and they say citrus and avocado food, fruit and vine food, rose food, but it isn't food. Plants make their own food through photosynthesis. And then I put up the equation you probably haven't seen since high school, where you take carbon dioxide and water and some light and the chlorophyll, and you get sugars and sugar or carbohydrates. That's what those are. Those are foods, and it gives off oxygen. And so basically, if you've got a plant that's not growing well, and one of the first things that our master gardeners get often in Sacramento County when someone calls is that, well, I fertilized. Well, you probably didn't need to fertilize. It probably has a bad root system. Maybe you're not watering adequately, things like that. So you need to check. Is it the soil, the water, root problems, weather, environmental conditions, insects, diseases? Every one of these had something else wrong with it that had nothing to do with putting fertilizer. And sometimes you put fertilizer on a weakened tree or shrub and it dies even faster. So you don't want to do that. Fertilizer, when you need it, does supply nutrients and minerals, but a lot of times the soil has it. And in fact, we have this myth that mature trees and shrubs need regular feedings of fertilizer for good growth. And the fact is, fertilizer is not needed for older woody ornamentals, trees and shrubs. Again, research after research after research. You got a happy little tree here. The nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium is all in the soil, and you're doing just fine. And really, the counties you guys are from, the county I'm from, you will find that it's usually not needed most of the time. Young trees that are recently planted may benefit, and they benefit from nitrogen. I'm not saying you can't use a complete fertilizer if you want, but you really only need the nitrogen for it to get them off to a faster start. This is a fellow in my neighborhood, his landscape, and I asked him, how does he have such gorgeous loropetalum? Everyone always says to him, what do you use for fertilizer? And he says nothing. He doesn't use a thing. He says, I water correctly, and I put down lots of mulch where I can fit it in, compost, things like that over the top, and that's all he needed. So my tip is, why not use your organic matter, your wood chips, your bark, your compost, and put it on the top? And here's my husband, what I call top dressing. We have mulch throughout the whole landscape of wood chips in our case. And what you're doing then is we're top dressing all of our fruit trees, our raspberries, our boysenberries, sometimes our roses, and we're putting compost over the bark mulch. We get wood chips delivered to us, and it is fabulous. What you're doing is you're feeding the soil. And remember, healthy roots are the key to a healthy plant. And you have healthy roots by having healthy soil. So you want to increase the biological activity. It'll improve the soil structure, the porosity, which means you've got a lot of air in there. And so you get aeration and more fertility too. What it'll do is all those wood chips and all those little organisms that are in the soil are breaking all that down. And they then release fertilizers, you can't legally call mulch or, wood chips and compost a fertilizer, but it produces a lot of different nutrients that go out right for the plant to pick up. And then, of course, any of you that put down a lot of chips or bark or anything over soil know it'll reduce your compaction and runoff from erosion. And you can actually walk gingerly on wetter soils that we don't want people to do otherwise, because they're going to compress or compact it. Insulating the soil, cooler roots, they're going to grow better. Conserves water. Now that's really vital during all of our droughts, and even just living in California, you need to always be thinking about conserving water. And then if you want to control weeds, you need a layer about 3 to 6 inches deep, and you'll control pretty much all your annual weeds. Unfortunately, some of your perennials, like nutsedge, you can't do a thing about. Nutsedge is the world's worst weed. And I always tell people when they ask me, how do I control my nutsedge, which by the way is a true sedge, so I don't call it nut grass because it's not a grass, it's a sedge. I tell them you need to move because it is really difficult to control it. And you know, if you've ever dug it up, you dig up one little nutsedge plant and 10 come to the funeral. That's the problem. So you want to control weeds then of your annuals. You'll get rid of all your annuals that way. So you don't have to worry about spotted spurge or purslane or annual bluegrass. It's going to protect trees from mower and trimmer damage. Oh my gosh, how many people want to get within a ½ inch of the trunk and then they slice off the trunk? And it improves the landscape appearance. So many non-woody plants, however, do need fertilizer. They're different. They produce a crop, or you mow off the stuff, and you can see there's my neighbor. And now I have a perennial garden here. I'm a native plant garden, excuse me. We took out the lawn, but this is fertilized. This is not fertilized. And so lawns do respond to fertilizer and start to do kind of pitifully if they don't have some fertilizer. Vegetables, berries, containers, it's always leaching out. You need to do that. Raised beds, yes, there's where you save your fertilizer. And again, most of the time, you can get away with just anything out there. A lot of the fertilizers on the market are marketing, and they all look pretty darn similar, even though they may say that they're for citrus or roses or avocados. If you read the back of the label, you go, oh, that's almost the exact same active ingredients. I want you to avoid the chicken soup cure-all approach. You know, chicken soup is good for just about anything you feel like. And we do have proof chicken soup helps when you have a cold or congestion or whatever. But I can't believe how many people call in with anything wrong with their plant, and they've all told you that they've applied fertilizer or pesticides, like especially insecticides, but mostly fertilizer. You need to do detective work. You need to find out, do you have the plant in the right location? Maybe it's looking bad because it's not supposed to be in full sun. It's supposed to be in shade, or vice versa. Maybe your tomatoes are not bearing because or your roses, there's a good example. Everyone thinks they need to put on phosphorus for roses, and they've got them in shade, and roses will not produce, or they'll produce pitifully in shade. Same with tomatoes. How's the watering? Soil too wet or too dry? Got to get over and take a look. Is the irrigation system adequate? Is it putting on enough water at a time? Are there any insects or diseases? You know, from a distance, you go, oh, that's all bleached out. Gee, maybe that needs some sort of fertilizer. And then you look really close and you go, oh, I think there's a critter down there. And it's a lace bug. Does it have a bad root system? We're back to those kinked, gnarled, pot-bound roots again, because you need to have healthy roots to absorb the water and the nutrients that are even in the soil. Try improving the soil. Use mulch and compost. Okay, you need to weigh the value of fertilizing a plant against the possible negative plant and environmental effects. It costs money, and when people overwater or the water runs off, all the stuff that was on their lawn, whether it's pesticides or fertilizers, it's going right into the creeks. And I live on a creek, and I know exactly what it looks like when people are putting on too much stuff, because the creek starts to turn really disgusting. It gets green and algae grow, and we're putting a lot of pesticides in our creeks and rivers and waterways and don't even realize it because it's coming off our lawn. So try to save fertilizer if you can. Okay, a myth. Trees planted in lawns steal water and nutrients from the grass. Well, no, they don't. The fact is, turf grass dramatically stunts the growth of young trees. There are chemical inhibitors in the grass. It's called allelopathy. And there's water and nutrient competition. And we've done research to show it. Look at this poor little sad pit. Oh, my little arrow got moved. It's supposed to be pointing to this poor sad little magnolia here. That magnolia was planted at the exact same time as everything else, but this has lawn growing right up to it, and this one has nothing. Now, you don't need this big giant area. That's too much, but we found through research done here in California and many other states that it really has a serious impact on newly planted trees And so this poor little ginkgo used to have lawn right up to it, and it never had a chance. It was sunburned. It had small, tiny leaves. The branches were sparse. And that's what we see over and over again. So you want to make sure you keep the lawn away. At least 12 to 15 inches or a diameter of 24 to 30 inches around. And you can make yourself a square like my neighbor did, or you can make a rounded area like a master gardener here did. And here it is. I just took a picture of it last year to show you this guy. He was my neighbor. He did everything right. He planted correctly, and we're going to talk about staking, which he didn't do. And anyhow, look at the beauty of that tree. You want to do all of these things so that you have your trees around for a long time. You're planting for the future, not just 4 years from now or 2 months from now. And then remember, a permanently maintained grass-free area will prevent lawnmoweritis, and I also say weed whacker woe. Do you know how many lawnmowers and string trimmers injure the cambium? That's literally just under the bark. And the cambium is the lifeblood of a tree and a shrub, any woody plant. It's what produces the water conducting tissue called the xylem and the food conducting tissue called the phloem. And if you then injure that at all, it cuts off the water and it cuts off the food to the roots, to the top of the tree. And here it is. I saw this from a distance. I started walking over, looking at it. I go, why is that magnolia looking so horrible? And then there it was. It had been hit by a riding lawnmower so many times that it just couldn't produce enough and transport enough food because it lost all of its tissue that conducts stuff. And then I saw this from a distance and thought the same thing, but this one was an actual vandal that cut it off. But it's the same thing. They cut off all the nutrients and all the water to the tree, and the whole thing died. It's called girdling. And here's another one there. And this tree, sadly, look at this one here. This area came later after they'd already beat the poor tree to death. Better yet, keep your trees out of lawns. This is my backyard, and there isn't a tree anywhere in any of my lawn at all. I keep them all off in their own little shrub beds. That means they can be irrigated separately from the lawns as well. They don't need the same types of watering. I have, this is an apricot tree. It's off by itself, and other landscapes where they've done the same thing and put the trees off to the side. That is the best thing to do. Okay, the other thing is oh, yikes, I just went back. Oh, now let's go back. Okay, you want to securely stake. Oh, gosh, I'm doing it again. Sorry about that. You want to go back to the myth of, okay, we've got a myth that you want to securely stake a tree to develop a stable root system and a strong trunk. Well, the fact is, rigid staking produces weaker trees with less root development. This poor tree can't move at all. Look at this poor little tree right there. And this tree, look at how many tree ties. That tree's not going to escape, that's for sure. And what's really sad is I have been taking photos since it was just a Kodak carousel slideshow that I used to give. And I've been taking photos since about 1980, 81, and giving this talk since 81. And then, of course, changing to a lot of digital when it all came out. And some of the same pictures are over and over again. Basically, we found the tip is all trees need movement. Now, you're going to hear a big word here, thigmomorphogenesis. It's going to help the tree grow really strong. And that's what it does. It has to move back and forth. They've actually found out that plants must move in order to strengthen their roots, in order to strengthen their top, their trunk, and everything. So if we don't do that, then the hormones in the plant is restricted, and it leads to, yes, a little bit taller tree, but it has a skinny little trunk, reduced taper, and it reduces the root system. So research was done where this one was never staked. This one had all the lower branches all kind of stripped off, which they do a lot in the nurseries. And then it was staked rigidly all the way up. And look what happens when you take the stake off. That's a real problem. And the problem is then you go into the landscape and you go, well, you've got to take that stake off. But what do you do when you take this off and it falls over? Well, we've come up with this 2-stake method. And this, by the way, was done, this research was done in the 70s. And then they came up with a publication on doing this. And so, and I still, this is a new picture that I just took probably a year ago. It's still a serious problem. Nurseries have a reason for staking. It has to do with transport, being able to grow them closer together, injury that might occur if people are bumping into them or whatever. But they always, at least a good nursery will tell you, do not leave the nursery stake on at all. It's going to rub all the way and maybe injure it. It's going to cause it to be weak. And people will say to me, oh, but I have to take the stakes off. I mean, I can't take the stakes off. The tree will blow over. Well, you'll see what happens with that. Anyhow, so I've got a little thing here about you place 2 stakes on either side of the root ball. You grab the tree that's hanging over, you've taken the stake off, and you kind of go up the trunk and you hold it at the lowest point. It'll stay in its own original position of upright, not just leaning a little. And that's where you place the stakes. And the thing is you really need to be purposeful about what stakes you choose and where, because you want the tree ties near the top. Because if otherwise the tree is going to go back and forth and whap itself on the stake if the stake is way up here. So, and use broad tree ties. So here we've got some stakes examples, and I probably have maybe 150 of these. I just selected a few. They're trying the right thing, but why have this big thing and take a chance as this grows that it's going to go back and forth and injure itself? And the same, this one is pretty good. That one's near the top of the tree. And this one needed 2 stakes because it was probably a large tree, like a 15-gallon or more. And then the tree moved too much. And so here, this again, a little bit too tall right here as far as the stakes go. It'd be nice to cut it off. But those are some examples. That's good staking, except for with some variation I'd like to see changed. Improper staking, the problem is here we have serious issues. First of all, they did the 2-stake method, but lashed it to the still stuck on the nursery stake. And yet we have these other stakes that are now crossing. They're going to injure it. And here you've got the stakes over here falling down. The tree's lashed to the nursery stake. You've just defeated everything you wanted about being able to get the trees moving. So you stimulate the hormones so that the roots will grow, the trunk will grow nice and thick, and it'll be able to stand on its own. Because eventually they won't stand on their own. And then if you leave this single stake right next to the trunk, this is in the neighborhood, and this poor lady, every one of her crepe myrtles has one of these bars stuck in it, and you can't get it out. And there's nothing you can do. You've got the catch-22. If you leave it in, the tree will die. If you take it out, the tree will die. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take. Same thing here. This is a peach tree with the original Dave Wilson Nursery tree tie still, or label, I should say, still stuck in there. This is the tree tie stuck in there. It's going to cut that limb right off someday. This is at a hospital near me, and I just keep watching it every year, going in, digging in deeper and deeper and deeper till it cuts off all the nutrients at first, all the food, and then eventually it's going to cut the water off, and then the tree is going to drop dead. And this one, see how skinny that trunk is there? And how fat it is here? Well, the food's coming down, and the highway's gone. It's like cars going down the highway, and all of a sudden the bridge is all washed out, and the cars have to stop, and they all back up. Well, all the food that the tree's making in its leaves is all backing up, and the rest of the tree is starving. I just see so many problems with 2 things. One, bad root systems, and improper staking. So I want to emphasize it. How long should you stake? Well, when it looks like that the tree is actually supporting the stakes, they've probably been in there a little too long. And this one was taken several years ago, and then this one was taken last year. It's still going on. It's got the nursery stake still, and then it still has the 2-stake method. Take that nursery stake off. Let it stand on its own for a little while, but this is not the way to go. And if it won't stand alone, did you stake it right to start with? You need to restake it with the 2-stake. You need to lower the ties. Maybe you need to thin out the top a little. You got too much of a sail up there. You want to encourage those trunk laterals. That's one thing the nurseries don't do. We don't have these little laterals, and they're just like little food making machines and shade making machines. And if we keep them short, you can't let them grow too long or the tree will be stunted. And then you have to check, does it have circling or pot bound roots? And that's why it won't stand. Many times that's the case. Okay. Most tree problems are caused by insects and diseases. That is not true. That's a big myth. But a lot of people, especially the ones that call in and say they just use some sort of insecticide or fungicide on their various plants, but it's improper watering. And here we've got too much water that killed this tree within 3 months. And this one was killed within 1 season. And this one, I just walked by it again this morning. It's on my morning route, and it's looking just as pitiful as last summer. This one's starting to look worse, and it will soon die. The roots were all cut. There's lawn. This guy here came from the East Coast, where the water on those trees, their native oak trees, have water. But in this case, it doesn't like the soil raised. Remember, raised soil, that's not good. And then watering regularly. Native oaks will not take it at all, but a lot of trees won't take it. This one is that same parking lot where all those trees were falling over. Well, we have algae growing in the middle of summer. And when you have algae or moss growing in a tree, well, in the summer, you know you're watering too often. Or when you see the mower tracks of a riding lawnmower here, and then you see a pool of water, you know, and you're going to get suffocation, just lack of oxygen, and you're going to get diseases, root crown diseases like Phytophthora and that. And we see this a lot. Frequent lawn irrigation led to the mushrooms that we see here. And what are those mushrooms? Underneath the bark, we have armillaria. And so you can have not just this Phytophthora water mold, you can get this armillaria, but by the time you see these mushrooms growing, it's too late, unfortunately. And it's all from water, water, water. Actually, native oaks live out in their native habitat with armillaria in the soil, but they never are infected because they don't get the rainfall except for in the winter months primarily then. And that's when the fungus is active and it won't invade. But we're doing it in the summer when they shouldn't be. And then just to show you that it's not just trees, this is a community where I was called out to look at their entire shrub bed was all dying back. And again, this is July, and I say bad sign because that's moss again. Lack of oxygen, and all of these pineapple guavas were dying. Underwatering, though, is also a serious problem. And I couldn't believe, I don't know why, this is not a mall or a shopping center going out of business. It's still a thriving one, and why they're killing off all their trees and shrubs, I don't know. This happened last summer. Maybe their water bill got too high or something, but it can lead to all kinds of problems too. You'll get insects that'll come in, beetles and various borers then, and they'll get sun scald, and that'll kill off again that cambium tissue, and everything will start dying back. Again, you look at it and you think, oh, maybe it needs water or fertilizer. Well, you need to find out. Yeah, it needs water, all right. Fertilizer, no. Okay, you need to know when to water. You need to know your soil. You need to check the soil before and after watering. Use a probe, a moisture meter, a trowel, a screwdriver, anything to figure out where'd the water go. How far did it spread? I see more problems with landscape trees with drip irrigation because people don't water long enough. And so you need to look, feel the soil, find out. We call it the hand feel soil moisture test, really fancy. You just dig up some soil and you feel it and you go, yeah, that feels kind of wet. Or, oh, that looks just right. Or, wow, that is really dry. So, and sometimes you can find soil probes. This soil probe right here, I have one just like it. I've had since 1981, and I still use it all the time. And nowadays you have to get them online. We were able to buy them back in those days at farm supply stores and that. Some nurseries will carry soil samplers or tubes or probes. Some water districts will give out moisture meters. They are kind of limited, maybe works in a container. They give you a very ballpark. For trees and things, it may not be that effective for you. And myth, deep-rooted trees, hey, they don't need to have lawn watering. So guess what everyone did during the initial 2014 drought, and then later during the drought that we just got over because of all those atmospheric rivers? They stopped watering, and all the trees are dying, deader than a doornail. Remember, tree roots are shallow, and they're especially shallow in lawns because they're watered all the time, or were watered. This redwood is now almost dead. I just saw it this summer, and it is really bad, and this one's on its last legs too. I have photograph after photograph after photograph of dying trees in people's lawns that they either stopped watering or reduced significantly. I always tell people too, it's really sad. How long does it take to grow a 30-year-old landscape tree? Well, it takes 30 years, right? A lawn you can put back in if you have to tomorrow with sod or whatever. You've got to think of your landscape trees. You cannot let them go without water or you will lose them. And they're so valuable. Another myth, trees are growing too tall. They must be topped for safety. Well, this was what the neighbor here thought way back in the 80s. And they then unfortunately found out later that topping trees is one of the most dangerous things you can do to a tree, the most hazardous. You think that you are topping it because it's too tall and it's going to be hazardous, and now you're creating a hazard far worse. If you don't like a 70-foot liquid amber, you shouldn't even have it. Get rid of it then. It's many other reasons that trees fail. And here we're still doing it. I took that with a Kodak, that's a Kodak slide. And this one here is just with a digital camera. And these, look at this, everywhere. Eucalyptus are often the victim. Top trees are hazardous. They're prone to decay. This all dies back. Fungus gets in here and rots it out. Here's a nice good old rotty one right here. Here's another rotty one in here. This is one of my older ones here. Limbs break, they snap out all the time. Oh, I got a good one down the street that snapped out 2 years ago, and then now it's got another one that looks like it's about ready to go, and they still haven't taken the tree out, and they just missed their car. I don't know what's going to come next. And then, can you guys even tell this is an olive tree here because it was so butchered? But that's what it is. Topping destroys the tree's function. Can that provide shade? To tell you the truth, I know this is an ash tree just because I know that bark. This one, I had no idea what it was. I have no idea. A top tree can never be made into a safe tree. Someday the branch or tree failure will occur. If you top a tree, you just have to keep it short and stubby like a hedge or a shrub, because it's not going to. In fact, this is what people say, oh, I need to prune my mulberries every single year. And the fact is, no, they don't need to be pruned annually either. They need to just be treated like a normal tree, but we haven't done that. And people think, oh, this is polarding. This is some sort of a scientific or an artistic method, and I have to do that, but you don't. And this is another neighbor, and the limbs are all starting. He polarded, he headed it back here. He thought he was polarding it. I told him he was just heading it back, and he needs to remove it. And I just saw another branch on it the other day hanging on the lawn. And I go, oh my gosh, when is it going to hit his car or somebody, or one of these major branches that weigh a lot of, well, some big limbs can weigh 400, 500, 600 pounds or more. A top mulberry is a hazard. It can never be restored. This is a neighbor that was doing it, and they tried to stop doing it, and they couldn't do it. They had to take it out. True polarding, so you know, is this kind of pruning. You're using a little pinky finger. You're removing a pinky's finger with a shear, a hand shear, and you're doing it every year or no longer than every 2 years. And some places, this is a place in Sacramento that is a shopping center, and it's a very labor intensive, but it is properly polarded. But sometimes maybe a more natural tree looks better. I don't know. Europe does a lot of polarding. Most of the time in Europe, they do it right, though. I've seen a lot of butchered ones too. The right cut is not a topping or heading cut ever. A thinning cut where you take and remove the branch completely back to its point of origin. So you've got a limb that you remove all the way back to its point of origin, and then you've got a beautiful tree that's open. The limbs can grow. You've not cut off the tips of the branch at all. It retains its original branch attachment, which is really sturdy and strong most of the time. And it's less likely to fail. It'll minimize decay. That is the kind of thing you need to do. Do not top. Proper thinning. Look at this. This is my oak tree. Proper thinning. The tree looks normal. How'd you like to just go soft the top here? No, you want to see the limbs. You want to see the silhouette. If you can see the tips and the nice silhouette of a tree, you've done it correctly. And here's that mulberry right here, thinning cuts on a mulberry. You don't have to top them. Unfortunately, once you start topping them, then you either have to continue to do it, or they get so heavy the limbs all start splitting out and you have to take the tree out, which is what we did when we moved into this house 43 years ago. Practically hardly had the beds put together. We were taking that tree out because horticulturists cannot have a butchered mulberry in their front yard. Some people think that this particular type of thinning is the way to go, and it's also harmful. It's where you start at the bottom and you just prune all the way up and you leave a little lion's tail or a poodle dog on top. It creates sunburn. You've got a wind sail up here. You've got a lot of branch wounds that then get infected with various decay. You don't want that either. If somebody tells you they're going to thin it and they stand at the bottom and then start climbing all the way up and sawing it off, stop right away. And don't use wound paint. No amount of research has shown that it ever works at all. It's harmful. It can cause sunburning. It can attract insects. We used to recommend it, but we don't at all. And I added the no because I got this picture off the internet and they still sell it. It's ineffective. It can be toxic. It's harmful. It doesn't heal the wound. Trees actually wall off their wounds. It's called compartmentalizing. They don't need wound paint to, quote, heal, because they do it themselves by walling them off. So you don't want to make a flush cut. You want to keep just outside the branch bark collar, and you're going to have the tree's natural barrier to decay. So this flush cutting here is the worst thing you can do to a tree besides topping the tree. And you want to instead make a nice cut just outside of the branch collar. Look for the swollen, wrinkled area. It has decay inhibiting chemicals that won't allow it to get into the tree. And you want to do that with your fruit trees and everything. If you've learned anything today, just learn to prune correctly so you don't have hazardous trees down the road and with decay and limbs that are going to break out and fall on your house or your car or maybe people. Proper pruning cuts will make nice little closures. Sometimes you'll get hearts, and they will then close beautifully, and the tree is nice and protected from fungi and insect attack. And this is what's going on inside, and it's nice and tidy instead of a big rot column. So educated pruning results in a tree that's attractive and safe while saving time and resources. And look at how beautiful those trees look. So I want you to know that properly cared for trees, they add beauty, they add health, they make you feel great. They add an aesthetic to the community. They add value to your home. They save all kinds of energy. They produce oxygen. So treat them carefully, prepare to plant a tree for the future, and then someday you'll have these beautiful trees that'll last for a long, long time. And I just love photographing trees, so I had to throw this in here so that you guys could all see more trees and enjoy them. Here I am back again, and if anybody has any questions that, Jennifer, do you have any that you saw that you want to tell me about?
Yes, I had a couple. Linda Beth wanted to know if a tree was planted too deeply a few years ago, should the soil around the base be removed now?
Yes, if you can. The problem is that sometimes the tree has been planted too deeply. If it's been in for less than a year or less, sometimes I'll tell people you may have to just dig that tree back up again, replant it up high, and shove the soil back in around it and plant it high. We call that planting proud. The problem is, though, what'll happen is if you've planted the tree too deeply and it's been in the soil for a while, then you've got to try to create some drainage away from the tree trunk. You may not be able to lift it. So whatever you can do to break down the soil that's around it, expose it, and then provide a dike through the whole area or something to prevent so that drainage can be taken away. That's the important thing. Anything else?
Yep. Kathy Brown wants to know if an old tree is fully engulfed in ivy, should you attempt to remove the ivy that appears to be larger and entirely wrapping the tree?
Yes, actually, you know what ivy does? It does exactly like a tree tie does on a tree. It does exactly like a root does. Ivy is a woody plant that has a very vigorous woody, basically climbing apparatus. It wants to get up a tree. And so what it does is it then climbs up and it tendrils around and around and around. And then you start compressing the tree trunk. And when you first compress the tree trunk, you smash in the bark. And then just under the bark, you've got that phloem tissue, which is the food conducting tissue, and it smashes that, and then the tree can't take food down. It doesn't kill the tree yet, but then the next thing it cuts into, if you leave it long enough, it's like sucking through a straw. You can't suck through a smashed straw. And what happens then, it hits the cambium, it smashes it, and then it can't even produce new phloem. It can't produce new xylem on the inside for the water conducting, and the tree eventually dies. It'll happen on a limb. So you try to pull it off and hope it hasn't smashed in too much. And actually, we live on a creek and we live on a 14-acre woodland area. And my husband is out there constantly. There's ivy that somebody planted years ago, Algerian ivy, the really big stuff, and it climbs up the native oak trees all the time. And he's constantly out there trying to take it off. And he's moved his way down further because he noticed some of the native oak trees are starting to look sad, and he thinks it's the ivy is compressing them. So yes, take out that ivy.
All right, Karen Deal wants to know, how should she remove the grass from around the tree trunk without hurting the roots or the trunk?
Well, you do the best that you can with, you can use a spading shovel, or, you know, one of those little ditch digger shovels where you just sort of stick it under and scrape, scrape, scrape and lift it up. If you've ever removed a lawn with a shovel, because we have, it's a lot of work, but you don't have to dig a whole huge area. And you just try to be as gentle as you can, and then be sure whenever you expose it, or even when you're just planting and you've got a cleared area around it, put down lots of mulch, put down compost on top, put down mulch. I always tell the nurseries that sell all that compost that they want you to put into the planting hole of trees and shrubs, you don't put it in the planting hole, stick it on top. The stuff's wonderful and you need it. And so put down bark, put down mulch, do whatever you need to, but definitely be gentle about it. You will, unfortunately, tree roots will grow to where there's oxygen and where there's water, and that's up where that grass is. So you will lose a few roots, but they will regenerate pretty darn quickly if you keep nice, cool, moist conditions at first with that mulch. Okay.
All right.
Anything else?
Yep, couple more. And Daniel, I think you might have covered this. How long does it take the two-stake method to stay in place?
Well, we usually tell people, if you're planting, fall is for planting. So if you're doing it now in the fall, or you've had to redo it, then let it go through the winter. That's the most challenging time for the tree, because it's being buffeted everywhere and the root ball is going like this and everything else. So make sure that you use the two-stake method as low as possible. Remember that the tree, if you do the two-stake method and then you've tied it and the thing then now starts to lean, you might have to raise the ties up higher on the stake or whatever, or put in a little bit higher stake. So go through the whole winter into the spring and then test it next summer. We usually say no more than 2 years, but a lot of trees will stand on their own after a year if you've done it correctly from the beginning. If they won't stand after 2 years, you can't just keep piling them on. There is a location in your county. Well, actually, I think this is probably a lot of woodland people, but the Fairfield area and Vacaville and that whole area, I was giving a presentation once for a bunch of park superintendents, and they had a parking lot full of trees that looked like they were supporting the stakes. And they told me, well, we can't take it off because they all blow over. But they'll never stand on their own. And they realized that they had left them on way too long, and they had to take out every single solitary tree. It was quite sad. So,
and costly.
And very costly. And I see this, by the way, all the time. I see blown over trees all the time, or trees that are girdled, or trees that have wounds on them. Staking is an epidemic. Even though people are trying to do it right, a lot of times they still fail because you got to get the thing off of there, and you can't leave that nursery stake on. So And by the way, I want you all that are listening, I want you to go out today and I want you to start noticing the things that you can notice. You can't notice the roots in the ground that are all girdle and stuff, but you can notice the improper staking and the bad pruning. And now you guys can be advocates for doing it right. Okay, I think we're done, aren't we?
There's two more questions, I think, and then we're done.
Oh, that's great. I'll answer them.
So Edna wants to know, is there a remedy for old weed whack, injuries to tree bases?
No, there really isn't. Wound paints of any sort are not effective at all on any wound at all. The only time is if you've got a fresh wound that gets sun on it, sunburned area, then we can whitewash it with a 50-50 latex and water or plain whitewash just to prevent sunburn, but that's it. So what you do, you look at it and you say, how much damage is there done? Is it a vigorous, healthy tree? Is the lawn away from it now? Can I keep it growing well? And if it's less than 50%, that's the total cutoff. You might be able to, that the tree will close the wound slowly if you've got a vigorous, healthy tree, and the tree will survive it. Wound's never going to go away. It's still in there. And years later, it may rot and decay, and that tree's going to go flop and break off, but not always. Sometimes it will survive that. But you have to evaluate that. And I have seen trees that were pretty damaged by all kinds of things, lawnmowers or animals chewing on them. We get people all the time about squirrels that have, done all kinds of digging on them, or cats or raccoons chewing or anything like that, squirrels chewing on the bark. And just kind of use the 50%. If you've got more than 50%, you can't do anything. Now, if the wound is fresh, brand new, you can kind of trim up the little edges around so that the tree can then close the wound faster. But that's about it. And keep it really vigorous and healthy. If it's a young tree, throw a little extra fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer, just to stimulate a little bit more growth. Okay, anything else?
All right, last question. Rebecca wants to know, what's the best way to straighten a young tree that's tilted?
Well, sometimes, especially if you guys are from Benicia, I always tell them to plant them tilted, because the wind always then just brings it back to the upright position. I get that all the time whenever I talk in the counties that have all that wind. But otherwise, what you just do is you have to reposition the tree, or you can pull it with a stake using the guy method. Look up how to guy a tree, where you pull it more upright and you have two stakes on either end, and you've got a nice big fat tie that's not going to cut into the bark, and you're going to pull it up, and sometimes slowly but surely. I've actually seen trees that the top was tiny little top and it was real thin, and we took splints. We did this at our Fair Oaks Horticulture Master Gardener demonstration garden, and we actually took wood splints and splinted it by putting a loose tie that's not going to cut into it again at the top and the bottom where the little skinny top was, and made it come back upright. And it took a little while, but it did. But you have to watch it carefully, because otherwise you can damage the tissue. So there are ways to try to do that. So, and the other thing they could do, I don't know if my talk is in the public domain. I give this talk all the time. I've got some really good talks that Master Gardeners can access from when I've given presentations, but I show pictures of guying trees and things like that. So you might find me somewhere, or find somebody else that talks about it. Use the UC Cooperative Extension websites, and look on your Master Gardener websites, and go to UCIPM and look up various things on tree care, and you may see stuff on that. Always type in UC whatever it is, or UCIPM. Then you're going to get information that's accurate for our area, and it's going to be research based. Anything else? Is that it then? Oh, and you put down a publication for the A&R catalog too, a link for that. Good.
Yep.
Great. Anyhow, okay, you guys. Well, thank you. How many people actually came at the very beginning? Did you happen to look?
Well, 53, including you. So that's a lot.
That's great. I'm glad to hear that.
Good group.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, wonderful information. Thank you, Pam. You
yes, and
a lot
maybe
of territory.
I know this is an overview that really takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
I can nail in more quickly on just certain things, but I want to give everyone just an overview to be thinking about these things.
Right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect for this group.
Great. Thanks a lot for asking me.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So next time, which will be the 28th, Christine Casey with Bee Haven will talk about pollinators and pollinator-friendly gardening. So definitely come for that, because she's very well versed in certainly that area. And if you haven't visited the Bee Haven here on the campus, think about doing that also. Either before.
It's fabulous.
Yeah.
I've taken lots of pictures there. I would love you to send you or Jennifer to send a link so our master gardeners can to attend, and any of the public too. That would be great.
I can do that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and this talk, along with most of the others, will eventually be posted on the public website for the Yolo Master Gardeners. So it will be accessible.
Great.
Sometimes it takes a few weeks, even a month or more for that to get up, but it will be.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. That's good. Thanks
All
a
right.
lot. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Pam. All right.
And Jennifer,
Bye,
get
everybody.
well.
See you in a couple
Thank
weeks.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.